Let's go to Chris Doyle. He's the director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. He joins me now from London. Hi there, it's a pleasure seeing you. So the US and Saudi Arabia are calling for a shoring up of efforts against Daesh. How possible is a resurgence, you think, of the terror group based on the grounds mentioned by both countries of not returning detained fighters to their home countries?
There are many reasons to fear a resurgence of Daesh, albeit at the moment, so far this year, there's been a really quite significant drop in numbers of Daesh attacks, both in Syria and Iraq. 55% drop in Syria and a 68% drop in Iraq, says the Global Coalition Against Daesh. But, these can be very misleading. Daesh plans for the long term. It's perfectly capable of going quiet for a considerable period of time before launching a very dangerous and lethal series of attacks. I think the biggest problem is not just those foreign fighters that remain in Iraq and Syria in those camps like al-Hol, but the conditions on the ground that groups like ISIS, and indeed, let's not forget al-Qaeda, feed off the resentment and the anger, the sense of disenchantment that so many feel in areas of both Syria and Iraq, out of conflict zones, where they feel nobody represents them, that they're not getting a fair chance at being party to governance, that they're excluded or marginalized. And that is really one of the biggest battles. And historically, in all of these theaters from Afghanistan to Libya, that is where the United States, regional allies, European partners have been at their weakest. We've always tended to be better at the security military aspects rather than the so-called hearts and minds campaigns.
You're quite right to say that Daesh has a tendency and capability of just going quiet and then reappear quite often with devastating effects. But Secretary Blinken said that they are monitoring the emergence of Daesh attempts to restart activities in Afghanistan specifically. Why do you think that is?
Because Afghanistan represents a very significant possibility for them to take root there, to take advantage of the situation in the aftermath of the US NATO withdrawal. They will find there a situation of poor governance, exactly the sort of terrain, and of course they have historical connections to it, that they would believe that they can flourish in. I mean, they go to areas of conflict, post-conflict, of areas in crisis, because that's exactly the sort of ingredients they need to win people over, to get recruits, where they can train, where they can earn illicit funds to move forward all their nefarious plans.
Do we know more about how the $150 million pledged by the US will be used for Middle East stability?
Well, $150 million is very welcome. But if we're really going to get stability, it's going to take more than funds. That's one ingredient to it. And, we have seen so many UN funding appeals go way underfunded. So actually 150 million, really, if you're going to talk about keeping the Middle East stable or returning it to stability even, is actually chicken feed, to be quite frank, because just in Syria, you have 15 million people who are in urgent need of aid. Now, most of those are Sunni Arabs. Many of them may succumb to the sort of language and the rhetoric of these extremist groups, frustrated and angered. They certainly may not welcome the resurgence of the Syrian regime under Bashar al-Assad. So, we need to get very serious about this. We need to be doing even better on the reconstruction, on the various peace processes such as they exist, to kick off those that don't. We need serious efforts at conflict resolution in order to remove that sort of climate where such groups operate, where the economies get boosted, people have an horizon. When people do not have an horizon, that's when it gets far more dangerous. And I'm afraid that's still the case in areas of Syria and Iraq, and indeed other countries.
Chris, your points are well received. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.